They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you love. She gave everything to her husband's family. Sleepless nights caring for his dying father, years of sacrifice without complaint. But just days before the funeral, her husband handed her divorce papers, while her best friend, dressed in red, watched with a smile. Thrown out like garbage, mocked, humiliated, even banned from the funeral of the man who loved her like a daughter. But fate had one twist left. At the reading of the will, they learned the unthinkable. She was the sole heir. The ones who cast her out were left with nothing but debt, regret, and each other's bitter blame. Would you forgive people who tried to destroy you, or leave them drowning in their own cruelty like she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story hit home, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more stories that will challenge everything you think about love, loyalty, and justice. I never thought my life would turn out this way. I grew up in a tiny town in Ohio, the daughter of a seamstress and a factory worker. We didn't have much. Most months, my parents barely made enough to cover rent and groceries. But they taught me something money could never buy. Work hard, stay honest, and family always comes first. Those words became the backbone of my life. They carried me through years of struggle, and they gave me hope when I married David Miller. Back then, David seemed charming, full of dreams, the kind of man any woman would be lucky to marry. And his father, George Miller, welcomed me as though I were the daughter he never had. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged to something bigger, something safe. When George's health began to decline, I knew what I had to do. I took care of him the way I would have cared for my own father. I cooked his meals, drove him to appointments, and sat with him when the nights grew long and lonely. For 2 years, I watched his body weaken while his spirit remained stubbornly alive. And through it all, I was there, because family comes first. David, on the other hand, was hardly ever around. He always had excuses. Too much work, too stressed. Sometimes he didn't even ask how his father was doing. I told myself not to judge him. Maybe caring for the sick wasn't something everyone could handle. But deep down, I saw the disappointment in George's eyes. More than once, he held my hand and whispered, "You're more of a child to me than my own son." Those words broke my heart because I knew they were true. Now, George's doctors had given him no more than a week to live. Every day, I sat by his side, adjusting his pillows, making sure he was comfortable, listening to his fading voice when he felt strong enough to talk. It hurt to see him slipping away, but I refused to leave him alone. He deserved love and dignity in his final days. Meanwhile, my marriage was unraveling right before my eyes. David was colder, distant. He no longer looked at me the way he once did. Nights passed where he didn't come home. I tried everything, his favorite meals, dressing up, even suggesting a short trip once things with George calmed down. But nothing worked. Then came the signs I couldn't ignore. The unfamiliar perfume on his shirt, the late-night messages he guarded on his phone, the lipstick stain I once found on his collar. My heart told me what my mind refused to accept. And then there was Lily, my best friend since childhood, the woman I had trusted with every secret, every fear. She started showing up more often, offering to help with George, acting sweet and supportive, but I noticed the glances between them, the way her hand lingered a little too long on his arm. I told myself it was impossible. Lily would never betray me. David would never go that far. But deep down, I knew the truth. In just a few days, the fragile world I had built with my love, my loyalty, and my sacrifices would shatter completely. I started noticing the silence first. David would come home later and later, slipping through the door with the smell of cologne that wasn't his. He barely spoke to me. When he did, his words were sharp, careless, as if I had become some burden he could no longer stand. One night, I set his favorite meal on the table, roast beef, mashed potatoes, gravy the way he liked it. The candles flickered between us. I tried to smile, Long day at work? I asked gently. He didn't even sit. He looked at the food, then at me, and shook his head. Don't do this, Anna. I'm not hungry. The door slammed behind him before I could say another word. I sat there alone, staring at the plates, the candles burning down to nothing. The next day, Lily came by. My Lily, the friend who knew everything about me. She stepped into the kitchen with her usual bright smile, dropping a basket of fruit on the counter. I thought you could use this. You look tired, she said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I forced a smile back, grateful at first, but then I noticed the scent she carried, the same perfume that clung to David's jacket the night before. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. I wanted to believe she was still my friend. That evening, I found David in the living room laughing at something on his phone. I stood there, waiting for him to look up. "David," I said softly, "do you think Lily comes around too much?" He didn't even blink. "What are you implying?" It feels strange. She's here more than usual." He threw his phone on the couch and glared at me. "Don't start with your paranoia. Lily's been more helpful to this family than you ever were." The words cut like a blade. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, too afraid to answer, too afraid of what he might say next. Days passed, and the distance grew into a wall. He stayed out later, sometimes not coming home until morning. When he did, his shirt smelled faintly of wine and perfume, his eyes glazed with excuses. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited in the dark, sitting at the edge of our bed. The clock struck midnight, then 1, then 2. At last I heard his car pull into the driveway. He staggered inside, humming some careless tune. "Where were you?" My voice was steady, though my hands trembled. He smirked, loosening his tie. "Out. Don't wait up for me again. You'll just disappoint yourself." "Was it with her?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. He froze for a moment, then laughed. "You really think you are worth the trouble of lying to anymore?" The room spun. My knees weakened, but I didn't fall. I stared at him, searching for the man I once loved, but all I saw was a stranger with cold eyes and a cruel smile. The next morning, Lily showed up again. She wore a red dress, far too bold for a simple visit. She placed her hand on David's arm as they stood together at the door, and for the first time, he didn't move it away. He let it stay there, right in front of me. I wanted to scream, to throw them both out, but my voice betrayed me. I just stood there, holding the tray of tea I had prepared, the cups rattling against the saucers from the shaking of my hands. Lily leaned closer, her voice low but sharp enough for me to hear. "You should rest more, Anna. Maybe take some time away. David and I can handle things." David looked at her, then at me, and his silence was the answer I had dreaded all along. That was the night I realized the shadows in my marriage were no longer shadows. They were real. They were standing in my home, laughing at me, daring me to fight back. The morning started like any other, but the air in the house felt heavier, colder. I walked into the kitchen and found David sitting at the table with Lily. She was dressed too perfectly for such an early hour, her lipstick fresh, her perfume filling the room. They stopped talking when I entered. Their laughter died instantly, replaced by silence thick enough to choke me. I set down a pot of coffee, my hand steady, even though my stomach twisted. "Morning," I whispered. David didn't answer. He simply pushed a folder across the table toward me. Lily smirked, her eyes never leaving my face. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a divorce petition, already signed by David. My name sat there in blank spaces, waiting for me to surrender. My throat tightened. What is this? David leaned back in his chair, arms folded, voice sharp. This is reality. It's over, Anna. You're leaving this house today. I shook my head, stunned. Your father! He's still alive! He needs me! He needs both of us! He cut me off with a laugh that made my skin crawl. Don't pretend this is about my father. You're not staying here out of a love. You're just waiting for what's coming. But here's the truth. You won't see a penny of it. Lily placed her manicured hand over his. It's for the best, Anna. You've always lived above your means here. You'll be happier on your own. Her words dripped like poison. My best friend, the one I had trusted, now spoke to me as if I were some unwanted guest. I rose from the chair, my voice breaking. After everything, after all these years, this is how you treat me? He slammed his hand on the table. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Sign the papers, pack your things, and get out. If you fight this, you'll regret it. My knees felt weak, but I refused to let him see me fall. I gathered the papers with shaking hands and pressed them against my chest. I won't sign. Not now, not ever. He stood, towering over me, his face twisted in rage. Then I will make sure you leave with nothing. No house, no money, no family. Behind him, Lily's smile widened. She whispered, almost gleefully, We'll build a new life, David, one that doesn't involve her. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to look at them both. I wanted to scream, to fight, to beg George to save me from this betrayal. But George was lying upstairs, weak and fragile, completely unaware that his own son was plotting to throw me onto the street before he even drew his last breath. I turned away, clutching my arms tightly to keep myself from breaking down in front of them. The sound of their laughter followed me down the hallway, echoing in my ears like a cruel melody. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just a failing marriage, it was an ambush. They had been planning it, waiting for the right time, waiting for George's last days to fall into place so they could cut me out before the inheritance became real. And I, the woman who had given everything, was suddenly nothing but an obstacle standing in the way of their greed. I spent that night on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of David's footsteps downstairs with Lily. Their laughter cut through the silence like knives, and I pressed my hands over my ears, trying not to hear. By morning, I gathered the little strength I had left. I walked into the living room to find Lily sitting comfortably on the couch, sipping coffee as if she owned the place. David stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Pack your things, Anna. Today's the day. I froze. Your father is upstairs. He could go any moment, and you want me gone now? His face was stone. You heard me. Don't make this worse than it has to be. Lily set her cup down with a clink and leaned back, her voice dripping with satisfaction. It's better this way. Everyone moves on. My chest tightened. I turned to David, searching for some trace of the man I had once loved. After everything I've done, the nights I stayed up with your father, the years I stood by you, you're just throwing me away? He smirked, his eyes cold. You were convenient, that's all. The words burned like fire. My knees buckled, but I refused to collapse. I walked past them into the bedroom, every step heavier than the last. I opened the closet and stared at the rows of clothes I had hung so carefully, the dresses George had once complimented, the sweaters David never noticed. I pulled out one old suitcase, the same one I brought with me when I first moved into this house. The zipper stuck halfway, as if it too resisted the thought of me leaving. I shoved in clothes without folding them, my vision blurred with tears. Behind me, I heard Lily's heels clicking on the hardwood. She leaned against the doorway, her arms crossed, a cruel smile on her lips. Don't take too long. David and I have plans tonight. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream at her, to rip that smile off her face. But my voice betrayed me. I stayed silent, packing the last of my things. When I wheeled the suitcase out, David was waiting by the front door, holding the papers again. He shoved them at me. Sign them now, or I'll make sure you never step foot in this house again. I pushed them back into his chest. My voice trembled, but the words came out sharp. I won't give you that satisfaction. His jaw tightened, but he opened the door wide, gesturing like I was nothing more than an unwanted guest. Then leave, and don't come back. The sunlight outside was blinding. I stepped through, dragging my suitcase down the steps. The sound of the wheels clattering against the stone pathway echoed like a cruel farewell. Behind me, the door slammed shut. Their laughter followed, muffled but sharp, like broken glass pressing into my skin. I stopped at the end of the driveway, clutching the handle of my suitcase with shaking hands. The house loomed behind me, cold and distant, no longer a home. For years, I had given everything to that family. I had loved, cared, sacrificed, and in a single morning, I was erased. The first night away from that house, I rented a room in a rundown motel on the edge of town. The sheets smelled faintly of mildew, the light above the bed flickered, and the sound of traffic from the highway outside kept me awake. I lay there with my suitcase at the foot of the bed, clutching my coat against the cold, wondering how everything I built had vanished in a single day. The next morning, I went out searching for work. I had no savings, no car of my own. David had made sure of that. I walked until my feet ached, asking at every small shop and cafe I passed. Most shook their heads. Some didn't even look at me. Finally, a coffee shop owner, a kind older woman with tired eyes, offered me a part-time job cleaning tables and serving drinks. The pay was barely enough for rent and food, but it was something. I nodded gratefully, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. The days blurred together. I woke before dawn, walked to the shop in the biting wind, worked until my back throbbed, then returned to my tiny room with nothing but silence waiting for me. I ate stale bread, instant noodles, whatever I could afford. At night, I sat by the window, staring at the glow of the city I used to belong to, and whispered to myself that I would survive. But survival came with its own cruelty. One afternoon, as I wiped down tables, I heard familiar laughter outside the window. I looked up and froze. David stood on the sidewalk, Lily clinging to his arm, both dressed in designer clothes. He glanced inside, spotted me in my apron, and smirked. He pushed the door open, the bell above jingling like a cruel joke. Lily giggled, brushing past me to order a latte. David leaned on the counter, eyes locked on mine. "Didn't expect to see you scrubbing floors," he said loudly, making sure the other customers heard. My hands shook as I carried their drinks to the table. Lily leaned closer, whispering just loud enough, "You should be grateful, Anna. At least you're good for something." They laughed together, sipping from their cups as if mocking me was their favorite pastime. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to keep working, refusing to let them see me break. It became a pattern. Every few days, they showed up, sometimes alone, sometimes together, ordering coffee, making snide comments, leaving big tips, not out of kindness, but to humiliate me. Each visit was another dagger, but I swallowed my pride and endured. At night, I walked back to my room, the sound of their laughter still ringing in my ears. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window and whispered to myself, "Hold on. Just hold on." And then came the night I couldn't forget. I was closing the shop when they pulled up outside in a sleek black car. David rolled down the window, calling out with a grin, "Need a ride, Anna? Or do you prefer walking in the cold?" Lily leaned across him, her laughter sharp. "Don't catch a cold, sweetie. You wouldn't want to miss work tomorrow." The car sped off, leaving me standing there in the freezing air, my breath turning white against the dark sky. I pulled my coat tighter and walked home, my shoes soaked from the slush on the street. I had never felt so small, so invisible. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the humiliation and the pain, a spark remained. A quiet promise to myself. They won't break me. Not completely. The morning of George's funeral was gray and bitterly cold. I wore the only black dress I had left, one I'd kept neatly folded in my suitcase. My hands trembled as I buttoned my coat, not from the chill, but from the weight pressing down on my chest. George had been more of a father to me than anyone, and I owed him a final goodbye. When I arrived at the church, the parking lot was full. Expensive cars lined the rows, men in tailored suits and women in fur coats stepping out as if this were some kind of gala. I kept my head down, clutching a small bouquet of white lilies I had bought with the last of my cash. Inside, the air was thick with whispers. I felt eyes on me as I walked up the steps, people turning to watch, murmuring behind gloved hands. My heart pounded. I told myself it didn't matter. I was here for George, just George. But at the entrance, two large men in black suits stepped into my path. Their shoulders were broad, their expressions blank. One lifted a hand. Name. Anna Miller? I said softly. I'm George's daughter-in-law. The man's eyes flicked to someone behind me. I turned, and there they were, David and Lily, standing side by side at the top of the stairs. He in a sharp black suit, she in a tight dress far too glamorous for a funeral. Their faces twisted into cruel smiles. She's not welcome here, David said flatly, his voice parrying over the crowd. I froze. David, please, let me say goodbye. Lily's laughter rang out, light and cruel. She stepped closer, her arm hooking through his. Oh, Anna, this isn't your place anymore. You're not family, not now, not ever. The guards moved forward, their hands brushing my arms, urging me back. The flowers slipped from my grasp, scattering across the stone steps, white petals against gray concrete. My knees weakened, but I refused to fall. The whispers grew louder. I heard fragments. That's her, the wife he left. She looks so thin. Why would she even show her face? Tears blurred my vision. I looked at David one last time, hoping for the slightest flicker of mercy. But he only turned away, guiding Lily inside as if I were a stranger off the street. The doors closed behind them with a heavy thud, shutting me out. I stood there in the cold, surrounded by petals and silence, my breath coming in sharp, broken gasps. I knelt to gather the flowers, but my hands shook too much. The bouquet lay ruined, and with it the last shred of dignity I thought I had. I pressed my palms against the stone step, the chill biting into my skin, and whispered so softly no one else could hear, "Goodbye, George. I'm sorry." The wind carried the words away, leaving nothing but the echo of the doors and the faint sound of the choir singing inside, a song I was never meant to hear. I turned and walked down the steps alone, each footstep heavy, each breath a struggle. Behind me, the church bell tolled, announcing the service that I would never be part of. And in that moment, standing outside the very place I thought would give me peace, I realized I had been buried too. Buried by betrayal, by humiliation, by the cruelty of the two people I once trusted most. A week after the funeral, I received a letter with the Miller family seal. My hands shook as I opened it. The message was brief. You are required at the reading of George Miller's will. Attendance mandatory. For hours, I sat staring at that letter, wondering why. After everything, after being thrown out like trash, why would they want me there? The law office was downtown, all glass walls and polished marble. I walked in with my coat pulled tight, the receptionist eyeing me with faint disapproval before directing me to a conference room. When I stepped inside, David and Lily were already there. He lounged in a leather chair, tapping his fingers against the table, while she leaned in close, whispering in his ear. Their laughter stopped the second they saw me. "Well, look who decided to show up," David sneered. Lily crossed her legs, her heels clicking against the floor. "Brave of you, Anna. Or maybe just foolish. You'll be walking out of here empty-handed, you know." I didn't answer. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, folding my hands in my lap. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to meet their eyes. The lawyer entered then, a tall man with silver hair and a stack of papers in his hand. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and began. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Mr. George Miller." The room fell silent. The lawyer read slowly, his voice firm. He began with the formalities, the usual legal phrases. David leaned back, looking smug, his arm draped across the chair behind Lily. She smirked at me as if to say, "Just wait." And then the words shifted. "To my beloved daughter-in-law, Anna Miller, who has cared for me with love and devotion in my final years, I leave the entirety of my estate. All properties, accounts, and investments shall be transferred to her name." The air was sucked out of the room. David sat upright, his mouth hanging open. "What the hell did you just say?" The lawyer continued as if he hadn't heard. "Your father's mind was sound when this will was written. His words were deliberate, his decision final." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of George's judgment filled the room like thunder. Finally, David turned to me, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. You did this. You stole everything from me." I met his glare with steady eyes. For the first time in years, I felt no fear, only the truth. I whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear. "I didn't steal anything. He just saw who you really are." The lawyer closed the folder with a sharp snap. The sound echoed, final and absolute. And in that instant, I realized George had given me more than an inheritance. He had given me justice. The days after the will reading were like stepping into a new world. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. Calls came in from bankers, advisors, people who had once brushed me aside, now suddenly eager to shake my hand. But none of that erased the memory of that conference room, the look on David's face when the truth struck him like a hammer. I thought maybe he'd disappear, drown in his pride, but he didn't. He came back. One evening, as I was leaving the cafe where I still worked, I saw him waiting outside. He leaned against the hood of a dented car, nothing like the luxury vehicles he once paraded around in. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, his eyes bloodshot. "Anna," he said, pushing off the car. His voice was softer than I remembered, almost desperate. "We need to talk." I stopped, keeping distance between us. There's nothing left to say. He stepped closer, hands out as if pleading. "I made mistakes. I was stupid, but we can fix this. You and me, just give me another chance." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't just make mistakes, David. You destroyed everything. You betrayed me, your father, yourself." His jaw tightened. "Fine. If you won't forgive me, at least help me. I'm drowning, Anna. The debts—" His voice cracked. "They're coming from me." Before I could answer, Lily's voice rang out from across the street. She stumbled toward us, her heels uneven, her hair messy, her eyes wild. She wasn't the polished woman I remembered. She looked broken. "Don't listen to him," she spat at me, pointing at David. "He's the reason we're ruined. He promised me everything, cars, houses, a life worth living, and now look at us." David turned on her, his face twisted. "You were part of this too. Don't you dare put it all on me." They shouted at each other, right there on the sidewalk, their words sharp and ugly. Passers-by slowed to watch, whispers spreading through the crowd. Finally, Lily turned to me, her eyes blazing. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you're better than us." I met her glare with calm she couldn't touch. "You don't need to think it, Lily. You showed me who you are, and you'll live with that forever." She scoffed, but her voice broke. "You owe me, Anna. All those times I lent you money when we were younger, all the times I stood by you." I cut her off, my words like ice. "You never lent me anything. You took, you drained, and you never gave back. Now it's over. You owe me." Her face paled, her mouth opening, then closing like she couldn't find the words. David reached for my arm, desperation spilling from him. "Please, just a little help. Enough to start over. I swear, I'll change." I pulled away. My voice was steady, final. "The man I married is gone, and the man standing here doesn't deserve saving." For a long moment, the only sound was traffic rushing by. Then I turned and walked away, leaving them both standing in the fading light, two people who had gambled everything on greed and betrayal and lost it all. Behind me, I heard Lily's sobs mix with David's curses, their voices crumbling into nothing. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift from my chest, not because I had won, but because I had finally let go. The night after that confrontation, I sat alone in my small apartment, staring out at the city lights. For so long, I had lived in shadows. Shadows of betrayal, of humiliation, of pain I carried in silence. But now, for the first time, the air felt lighter. I wasn't the one left behind anymore. I was the one still standing. Days turned into weeks. The legal transfer of George's estate moved forward. Each signature and document another reminder of his trust in me. Bankers spoke in numbers that once would have terrified me, but I listened calmly, remembering his voice. "You're the daughter I never had." Yet wealth didn't change my routine. I still worked at the cafe, at least for a while. It wasn't the money that kept me there. It was the reminder that I could survive with nothing, that dignity isn't measured in dollars. But David and Lily couldn't hide from the consequences of their own choices. Word spread quickly, creditors closing in, debts unpaid, once loyal friends disappearing. They had burned through everything, and now they had nothing left to burn. One afternoon, as I left a meeting with George's lawyer, I found them waiting outside the building. David looked thinner, his suit hanging loose on his frame. Lily's eyes were hollow, her makeup smudged, her designer heels scuffed from too many nights spent wandering. David stepped forward first, his voice hoarse. "Anna, please, we're sorry. We made mistakes, but we've paid for them. Help us, just enough to start again." I looked at him, at the man who had once been my husband, the man who had laughed while throwing me out of my home, who had let his mistress sneer in my face. My chest ached, but not with pity, with clarity. "No, David," I said quietly. "You wanted me gone. You wanted me destroyed. Now you live with what you chose." Lily rushed toward me, her words spilling out like venom. "Don't act like you're better than us. You only have this because of George. If he hadn't given it to you—" I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. "If George hadn't seen the truth, you would have taken everything and left me with nothing. He trusted me because I earned it. You had your chance. You threw it away." Her face twisted, and for a moment I almost saw the friend I used to know, the girl I once shared secrets and laughter with. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone who had sold her soul for the taste of luxury. David's voice cracked, desperation breaking through his pride. "We'll do anything, Anna. Please, don't let us drown." I stood tall, my heart steady. I already saved the person that mattered, George. I gave him love when he had nothing left. You, both of you, chose greed over love, cruelty over kindness. That's not something I can fix. They stared at me, broken, waiting for mercy that would never come. For years, I had carried the weight of their betrayal. Now, I set it down. I turned and walked away, their voices fading behind me. Each step felt heavier and lighter all at once, heavier with the memories, lighter with freedom. Later that night, I visited George's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the sky painted with the glow of 1,000 stars. I knelt, brushing leaves from his headstone, and laid a fresh bouquet of lilies where my ruined ones had once fallen. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me, for trusting me, for giving me back my life when others tried to take it." The wind stirred gently, as if carrying my words into the earth. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, but they were not the bitter tears of before. These were tears of release. When I rose to leave, I felt stronger than I had in years. I wasn't just George's daughter-in-law. I wasn't just the discarded wife. I was Anna Miller, a woman who had endured betrayal, humiliation, and cruelty, and survived. And as I walked away from that grave, I carried with me the one truth I had learned through it all. Wealth can vanish, beauty can fade, even love can betray you, but dignity, the courage to stand tall when others tried to break you, that is something no one can take. Life can be brutally unfair, but it has a way of balancing the scales. This story isn't just about a broken marriage or a friend's betrayal. It's a powerful reminder about loyalty, integrity, and the weight of our choices. Anna gave everything she had, her love, her years of service, her entire youth. In return, she was discarded like nothing, betrayed by the two people she trusted most. But what they didn't understand is this: kindness is never wasted. It leaves a mark, and when the moment of truth arrives, it speaks louder than betrayal ever could. David and Lily thought wealth and desire could replace responsibility and gratitude. They built their dreams on lies, thinking they had secured their future. But their castle was built on sand, and when the tide came in, it collapsed in seconds. This story teaches us that genuine love and loyalty may not always shine right away, but in the end, they outlast greed, lies, and vanity. It's a reminder that while betrayal may bring short-term gain, it ultimately destroys everything. And for those who stay true, their dignity becomes their greatest inheritance. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe kindness always comes back around in the end? I'd love to hear your perspective. Make sure to hit that like button to support the channel, subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story, and share this video with someone who might need this reminder that justice is real and betrayal always has a price. Before you go, let me ask you one powerful question. If you were Anna, would you forgive David and Lily, or would you do what she did, walk away and never look back? Your answer could inspire someone else who's struggling with betrayal right now. And trust me, tomorrow's story will move you even more.